Hi everybody, this is Adam. I chose understanding the follicular phase of the menstrual reproductive cycle as my presentation, and so here we go. I took this as kind of an opportunity to teach this as if it was for teenagers, kind of how the description was talking about, so it might seem a little childish, but I did it on purpose. But yeah, let's get into it. So, the follicular cycle is the first part of the menstrual cycle. It begins with the first day of menstrual bleeding, that's called day one, and it lasts for about 2 weeks on the typical. Everyone's a little different, and so if your 2 weeks is different than someone else's 2 weeks, that's just fine. We're looking more for regularity and consistency than we are exactly 14 days. The purpose of the follicular phase is to prepare the egg and to rebuild the uterine lining for a possible pregnancy. And there are three hormones part of the follicular phase. We'll get into those a little bit later. Follicle stimulating hormone is the most important one. It kind of kicks off the whole shebang, and it's easy to remember because the follicular phase is the follicle stimulating hormone's main job. The other two hormones that are going on in this phase are the estrogen and the luteinizing hormones. You can see on this graph here that they all kind of begin off a little low. The white one is the follicular hormone, and you can see it kind of increases and spikes right before ovulation, which you'll learn about later. But this blue line, the estrogen, that one slowly climbs up throughout the phase, then drops off right before ovulation. And this is the one that people who have periods tend to feel the most of. We'll get into that in just a second. We'll learn about the follicular phase by going through the 5 W's, the who, what, when, where, and why of this phase. First off, who has a follicular phase? Generally, it's everyone with a period, but really just anyone with working ovaries can have a follicular phase. So if you don't have a uterus, like say someone had it surgically removed for whatever reason, that's called a hysterectomy. The follicular phase tends to work only on the ovaries, and so the follicles in the ovaries, you can have a follicular phase without a period if you don't have the uterus to respond to it. There's a lot of people who don't have a follicular phase, more people than you would think, actually. People taking hormonal birth control. The hormonal birth control tends to suppress the follicular activity, stopping the follicular phase, or even just shortening it or lengthening it to a point where you don't release the egg. And that's where we don't have pregnancy. No egg, no pregnancy. People with certain medical conditions that can halt that egg release, including PCOS, severe stress, eating disorders, which can lead to other nutritional disorders or just a nutritional disorder in general, and then even some intense athletes. They work out so hard that they don't have the fat content to have a baby survive, and so their body's smart enough to say, oh, well, we're not going to have a baby anyway, and it stops the follicular phase and the rest of the period so that you don't have a risky pregnancy. And then people with expected hormonal changes. This includes menopausal women because we expect their hormones to kind of die down and slow down as they get older, but also transgender men. The testosterone tends to suppress and even stop their follicular phase and their periods if they choose to be on long-term testosterone, which I thought was kind of interesting. But cisgender men, obviously there's no ovaries, and so there's no follicular phase. And then transgender women, they had male parts when they were born, so they don't have the follicles, and so they also don't have a follicular phase. So what happens? The three hormones control what happens during the follicular phase. We already talked about them. The follicle stimulating hormone is the main guy. Don't worry, we won't need to memorize these chemical structures. Estrogen is the other big name. It's the one that you tend to feel the most. And then luteinizing hormone, it's got just a big flash at the end. It doesn't have a long part. It's a big part, just not a long part, and we'll get into each of these individually. So a follicle stimulating hormone does exactly what its name says. It stimulates the follicles in your ovaries to grab a little egg and start maturing it through these phases before it gets released. Now, it has a bunch of these eggs develop, and your body then picks the most fertile one to be the one that's released at the end of the follicular phase, which you'll learn from one of my other friends today. And then those extra eggs that the egg that don't get released get reabsorbed back into the body. And so it stimulates the follicles to develop an egg. It slowly rises between days 1 and 14, and then it cuts off because once the egg is released, it no longer needs to have one mature, and it waits until the egg that's in the uterus gets shed out with the bleeding of the period before it starts developing a new egg. The second one is estrogen. This one prepares the uterus to regrow its lining after it sheds. So after someone has a period, they bleed out this extra lining, and estrogen helps build up that extra blood flow so that the egg can implant once it gets released and sent down these fallopian tubes after ovulation. This is the one that people tend to feel more. It can cause an energy spike. So your skin tends to feel softer. It increases feelings of confidence and socialization. And so this, I've heard some of my female friends say the estrogen glow, and they kind of like the way they feel right before they have ovulation. It's evolutionarily wise, this phase has been kind of interesting because some scientists think it helps women get a little more in the mood before they ovulate so that they can get pregnant more easily. But a lot of my friends growing up just said they enjoyed this because it was right after their period, and so they felt really good after they were done bleeding. But that might not be everybody's experience. Now, luteinizing hormone, like I said, it doesn't have that big long-term part, but it does tend to have an important part because it spikes right before ovulation, which is where the egg gets released. And then it's what tells the body to start sending that egg down the pipes or the fallopian tubes to the uterus. And that happens around day 14. Now, this is kind of the hard part, the what. We've learned the who and the what happens, but we have another what question. Like, what does it look like if something is wrong during the follicular phase? You can have irregular or missing periods. That means the eggs are taking too long or too short to mature. You can have stretchy white cervical mucus, that's like egg whites. You may have thinning hair, fertility issues, or even mood changes because that estrogen's not having, it's not increasing the way it's supposed to. So when should I talk to a doctor? If you have sudden changes in your cycle, say you've been pretty regular and then suddenly you're having periods more sooner than you're used to, or you feel like you're skipping periods without getting pregnant. Or even those estrogen feelings, just feeling off and gross about halfway between your periods when you're supposed to have that estrogen spike. Now, if there is an issue, it's really easy to figure it out. There's some blood work that we can do to kind of see where your hormones are. It might take a test or two timed throughout your period so we can see how those hormones fluctuate over time. And then even an ultrasound can help figure out if it's a structural issue, like if one of those fallopian tubes or pipes are blocked, causing some of these buildups and discomfort. So where can you learn more? Not everybody has the same family structure, but we all should have adults at home, whether it's grandparents, parents, uncles, aunts, just anybody at home that you can speak with. Sometimes if you don't have a female at home that can help you out, or someone who has a period at home, still ask. They might have friends. My wife is transgender, but I have a lot of friends who have wives that if we do adopt and have a daughter, I would have them speak with. Other adults you trust, if you have friends whose parents you'd like to speak with, or even your doctor, or even me, like I'd be happy to stick behind, or even have one of my girl doctor NP students come over and speak with you for a minute. That would be just fine. And then Planned Parenthood, it's a little funny how the government and everything is going on with that, but they are still open and they do still have a lot of free services. You can always call them to get some advice and have some questions answered over the phone for free. And then if you do need to visit, they do take insurances if your parents would let you to take that. or they even have non-insurance visits that you can just pay cash for, and they do keep most things between just you and them. But if it is something that's dangerous to you or the people around you, they do have to speak out. But you can always give a call ahead first and see what they have to say. This is important to know because if you do have issues in your follicular phase, it can be hard to have kids later. No egg, no baby. And then also being able to be in control of your body and like empowerment and finding those words to be able to tell your doctors and the people you care or who care for you. Learn those words that would best help you get the help that you need. It's all about being that advocate for yourself and understanding your own body and when things feel wrong. Now, this is a game, we're running out of time, but we can go through it pretty quickly. I have some people here that we can just figure out if they have a follicular phase. Cis woman, yep, they do. Majority of the time they do, unless, they've hit menopause or they're on birth control like we talked about before. But they have the ovaries, they work, they should have a follicular phase naturally. A transgender woman, now we said earlier she doesn't have ovaries, so she will not have a follicular phase. Same with a cis man, no ovaries, no follicular phase. Now, transgender man, maybe. Depends on if they're deciding to take testosterone or not. But when they're on a testosterone for a long time at certain doses, it can stop their follicular phase. So it just kind of depends on what they've chosen to do with their gender identity. Then last, your mom. It's just a stupid little joke. But I'm not sure if your mom has a follicular phase or not. Depends on how old she is. But she used to, because if you are here, that means your mom had at least one follicular phase. So in conclusion, everyone with a period and a few extra people have a follicular phase. It is the body preparing the egg in the uterus for a healthy pregnancy. It can be hard to feel when things are wrong, but it's not impossible. You just got to kind of, track how you feel and the timing with your last period. And then understanding the patterns of your own follicular phase can help you ask for help more effectively. These are the references where I learned this information, but if there's any questions, please feel free to stop me after class and we can talk about it. Okay, well, thanks, guys. We will see you later.